Hey everyone, welcome to Brown Girls Happy Hour again. Today we have a very special guest joining us, but before that, let's wait for Kathy to join in and together we will make a mocktail today. Hey Kathy,
Hi, Daman. How are you?
good, how are you?
I'm good. A little bit lazy. It's a lazy Saturday, so it's
Well, it's good for you because we are making a chamomile mocktail and I read that it can put you to sleep, so I guess
yeah,
that's there. You can sleep more.
yeah. And
So we are waiting for Jasmine to join now and then we can start. Hey Jasmine,
Hi, everybody.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here today. I went to the grocery store to find kiwis like just an
Me,
hour ago.
just before this, I went there.
That was my mission today to find the ingredients.
thank you for joining us, Jasmine. We're so excited to have you here as well and to discuss your book and your journey with us. And but before we do that, let's. Do you want to give a little bit of introduction of yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Jasmin Kaur. I'm a poet. I used to be a primary school teacher, and now I am an author. I'm the author of If I Tell You the Truth, which just came out in January, and I'm also the author of my first poetry collection. When you ask me where I'm going, so a lot of my work deals with my experiences growing up in Canada as a Punjabi and Sikh woman and a Sikh girl, and all of the complicated stuff that comes with being visibly Punjabi and visibly Sikh, and sometimes the challenges that come with that in terms of like immigration and identity and racism and just the struggles of being a woman in a world that is not always welcoming to us. So all of those real life experiences tend to like come to life in my poetry and my prose and my novels.
That's awesome.
Awesome. We
Yeah.
look forward to reading it.
I'm so excited for you guys to read.
Should we
Before
make?
we go ahead, let's make the mocktail first.
Yes.
So it's a very simple, it's basically a tea, but we'll call it a mocktail. So you need a chamomile tea. I already have mine steeped here. And then you'll add to it some honey.
Yeah. I don't think both of us have honey. Jasmine and I don't have honey.
And then you just need a kiwi wheel. That's it. That's all you need. And I'm gonna just mix it a little bit. All right, so we have it here. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, the honey is really good in this.
This is like a really good like just collection of different ingredients. It's like surprisingly with the kiwi, like I love it as a tea.
Yeah, didn't think kiwi would go, but I'm loving the flavors in this.
It's really good.
Yeah. I don't have anything to say. My tea
Oh,
is
our tea is different.
visibly different.
You should have picked chamomile. Your lazy Saturday would just go on.
Right.
Jasmine, you mentioned your favorite female author is Angela Davis. Tell us why.
Yeah, I absolutely adore Angela Davis. Angela Davis is a nonfiction writer primarily, and she began her journey as an activist. So in the 1970s, I believe she was advocating for the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement in America, and that like her activism resulted in her being arrested and incarcerated, and she fought her own trial herself in court, and that kind of galvanized her to continue writing about the rights of prisoners and the rights of incarcerated people, and ultimately to challenge this idea of incarceration in general. So I was really inspired by her as an activist, and then I love it when activism comes together in like in writing as well. Like I think of Arundhati Roy for the same reason, because she's someone who is like so bold about her beliefs as an activist, and then her storytelling and her novels are so beautiful because of that. So I find myself in constant awe of writers in general, but especially writers who write in such a way that like the world gets shaken up and people get mad sometimes. I think that's like the most like amazing thing about being an author, being able to challenge people's perceptions like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where the pen becomes the sword, right?
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I was actually on Instagram right before our meeting, and I was reading one of your poems, and it was amazing. It was like you also have the power to, change the world. You write in the same way. I was going to say that. So it seems to me like, you're following their path, like your favorite authors. So that's great.
Thank you. I'm very humbly trying to follow in the footsteps.
Right. And also, I wanted to ask you, so like you said that you were a primary grade teacher and then you became an author. How did that transition happen? Or did you always wanted to become an author and then?
That's a great question. So when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I was focusing on English, and my plan when I was in high school was just to become a teacher. I didn't really know too much about the publishing world. I didn't really know much about what options and paths are there for poets. I love poetry, but it didn't seem like something that could be my career at that time. I just didn't know too much about it. But in my undergrad, like I started taking all these English classes, and I thought I'd get a bachelor's degree in English and then use that degree to become a teacher, and that was my life plan. But what happened instead was that I was in these classes learning creative writing, learning how to write poetry and fiction, and I was having so much fun. Like I genuinely loved being in those classes so much. It didn't feel like school. It just felt like I was doing a fun thing that I enjoyed. And if I also got to get grades for it, that was great. So I was doing these classes. I was writing poetry. I was learning how to like perform poetry in front of people. And it wasn't necessarily a hobby. It was a thing that I loved and I was serious about. But I did not see a professional path for myself. For all sorts of reasons. I think that we're not, we don't really have conversations about what a career as an author could look like or a career as a poet could look like. We're kind of taught, um, you pick a salary job and you go do your 9 to 5, and that's a stable thing, and that's what you should look for. And it makes sense, I guess, that our parents like want us to go in that direction sometimes, but there's so much joy in like in a creative path as well. So I went ahead, finished my English degree, got my teaching degree. I had a job teaching for about 6 months with one group of fourth graders, and I really, really enjoyed it. I loved, seeing the kids every day and working with them. But I knew in my heart as well that I had a book inside me. I knew that I could completely write a book. I just needed to like make the time for it. I was so busy with university first and then my classroom after that I knew that that wasn't going to be a time for me to write. So right in the middle, like once I graduated from my teaching program, just before I started working, I had about 3 weeks available to me as a holiday, and I was like, this is the only time I'm gonna get to write this book. So I just need to like take all my poems and start putting them together. I had this folder on my laptop with like all these poems in it, like hundreds of poems, and I was like, there's pieces in here that I can use for the book. So I started arranging them and like putting them in the order that felt right to me. I started writing new poems to fill in the spaces and tell a more cohesive story. And then before I knew it, at the end of that winter holiday, I had a first draft at least of the book. And then over spring break, after I had started my job teaching, I had 2 more weeks available to me. So on those 2 weeks, I edited and edited and edited, worked really hard, and then finally I had a manuscript. Um, did not have anywhere to go with it though at that point. So someone who I was chatting with, she had shared that she was open to like sending my manuscript off to her editor at her publisher, and that was so exciting for me. I didn't really know what it would entail, but she also mentioned that I should probably try to look for a literary agent. And again, I had no clue about any of this stuff. I was like completely new to this industry in every single way. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go find an agent. Like, where do you find an agent? How do you find an agent? Um, and genuinely, like I got so lucky because I didn't know what I was doing at all. I got so lucky because just a couple weeks prior to that conversation, a literary agent had followed me on Instagram, and I was like, okay, that's an agent and I don't know anything else about any of this, but maybe I should contact her. So I did. Sent her an email. I was like, I noticed that you followed me, and I also noticed that you're not accepting submissions right now, but do you have any recommendations about like other agents who might? And surprisingly, she was like, actually my website's just out of date. Like I followed you because I wanted to work with you, and I love your poetry and we should definitely have a chat. So from there, I sent her my manuscript. And then that same week, I think we had been chatting and it was like a go from both of us. So I signed a contract, I got myself an agent, and then we spent 1 month just editing and editing and editing the project proposal, the literary proposal that would go out to all the editors. Um, Went ahead and did that. And then, long story short, the books found their home with Harper Teen in North America and then Penguin Random House in India. And that's how, when you asked me where I'm going, became a physical book. And then at the same time, we also got the contract for If I Tell You the Truth as well. So I was teaching for those 6 months all the way to summer break. And then because of that contract coming in right on the last week of school, I got to pause and take a break for a while from teaching. And I've just been writing since.
That's amazing. I love that journey. How just things happen towards the end, right?
Yeah, it's sometimes like things happen. I don't know if it's like a things happen for a reason kind of thing, but it was like very coincidental. Like everything just kind of fell into place very, very beautifully.
Yeah.
And you
Did you used to,
mentioned,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Daman.
you go ahead. It's okay.
No, I was just asking, did you used to write poetry when you were a child as well?
Not poetry. I remember writing a play in the first grade.
Oh, wow.
And I was also a very avid reader. Like I would always have a book in my hands wherever I
We
was.
can
I
relate to that
remember
for sure.
like when I would be like a little, when I would be a little kid in the grocery store, I would have a book in my hands and I would just walk
Yeah.
into the walls.
Yeah.
um,
So relatable.
yeah, I think when I was invested in a book, if I wasn't interested, like after the first chapter, like I would not be that kid. But if I was engrossed in a book, then you couldn't distract me anyway. So I think that my love for writing came from reading. I think you have to kind of love books as a reader in order to want to write them. And I think the first poem I wrote was in 12th grade. We had a poetry assignment from my 12th grade English teacher, and he asked us to write like 12 poems as part of like a mini book. And I had so much fun with it. And I was just beginning to read poetry as well at that time, so I was becoming a fan of like Sufi poets like Rumi, and just falling in love with what poems could do in such a small bit of space. Um, so my love for poetry came from there, and I think in my first year of university, that's when everything really solidified for me. I was getting interested in activism and social justice issues, and one of my friends, she loved slam poetry, like on that you can find on YouTube, like Def Jam poetry and button poetry. So she would just send me the videos of all these amazing poets, and we would just send video links back and forth, gushing over our favorite poets. And I remember thinking like, oh, we should host a poetry slam. Like that would be so fun. And she was like, absolutely on board because we both love poetry so much. So we started trying to figure out how to plan this event. And in the process of planning the event, someone was like to me, like, Jasmine, why don't you try to perform something as well? And at that time, like I was like a big no. I was very shy. I was like a very introverted kid naturally. So I was not sure if I wanted to stand in front of people and perform my poetry. I just wanted to bring everybody to the event and like let them have a good time. But because she encouraged me, because my friends encouraged me, I tried to like write a piece and just wanted to see what would happen. And that ended up being my first public performance. And from there, I realized that although I am an introvert, I really do enjoy expressing myself creatively in front of people. And I think I found more of my voice in the process of learning how to celebrate myself on stage, where I was very shy and introverted before. I think that I found a more extroverted side of myself as well. In small doses, I don't think I have like the energy to like perform 24/7, but like in small doses, I do enjoy it. And then from there, I think it was just like an epiphany moment. Like this is what I need to be doing, and I actively went and tried to take more creative writing courses in my university program, and the rest is history. I guess I just never stopped.
So you mentioned performing poetry. How different is it writing poetry and performing poetry?
That's a great question. I think like, there are some poems that I write that I know I'm going to perform. So as I'm writing, I'll just be like reading it out loud again and again and again because I think that when you're performing, there's a rhythm and a cadence to everything you say, even if it's not in iambic pentameter or something like that. Naturally, your voice just kind of moves in a certain flow. And I think that when you figure out what your flow is, then the storytelling aspect of your poetry becomes stronger. So when I'm writing poetry that's meant to be performed, I will usually be saying it out loud at the same time and just trying out the words in my mouth to see what it's like. Um, with poetry that is like just meant for the page and I'm not imagining it as like a longer piece, I think that my mind kind of gravitates to which words will weigh the heaviest in my reader's heart and which words will have the most immediate gut punching impact. And I say that because I tend to write shorter pieces of poetry. Some of the pieces are long, but a lot of them are shorter. And I think that the coolest thing about a short poem is that it can go straight to your gut and just like punch you in a second. There's like no delay. So
Yeah.
when I'm writing those shorter pieces, I have to think really economically about the language. I have to think about what the most perfect words are to express an idea so that you feel what I feel the first time you read it. Um, and that's kind of my process there. It's a lot of like just pausing and thinking and revising and revising and revising until each word feels like it has a purpose and it belongs in the piece.
Yeah, and I think that's why your poems are so like, hard hitting. Like they're so good to
Gut
read.
punching, like she said.
Yeah, that's so good. So what are the what kind of, like what is your favorite book genre?
I That's a good question. You know what? I actually love fantasy. I have been reading a lot of different stuff. I've been reading novels in verse, I've been reading some contemporary stuff, but I always find my way back to fantasy. And I think it's because the coolest thing about a book to me is the way that it can just transport you to another world. I love the idea of just being able to escape what is real and um enter a completely new landscape. And I think the coolest thing about fantasy authors is that they spend all this time imagining an entire reality from top to bottom in ways that like we don't perhaps see in contemporary work. Um, so that's yeah, fantasy is my thing. I think when I was really young, like I was that kid reading like Inkheart and Harry Potter and all those kinds of books and feeling really immersed in those spaces. And now as an adult, like I still love YA fantasy. I love, the series Serpent and Dove. I just got my hands on an arc of Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. All that kind of stuff. Everything that has a witch in it, like I'm all over it. Anything like that is set in our world but has like an element of fantasy as well. Like I love that.
I also like fantasy books a lot, and Harry Potter for sure is
Yeah,
always
that was my childhood.
Do you plan on writing a fantasy novel at some point?
I
Yeah.
do. I'm actually working on one right now.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'm really, really excited about it. It's very much in like the early stages, so I can't really share too much. But this is a fantasy novel set in Canada, in Abbotsford, and the main characters are Punjabi teenagers living in Canada,
yay.
which I'm so excited about. And it centers around a teenage Punjabi witch and the magical things that happen um, around her herbal apothecary,
I
and that's
needed
all I
this
can give
book
away.
when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yay.
that's exactly why I write like the books that I write. If I tell you the truth, which is my novel that just came out, it centers a Punjabi daughter and mom duo, and they're living in Surrey, BC, and they're dealing with the immigration system in Canada, and also a huge secret that is weighing on the mom's heart about a history of violence back home. And the reason why I wrote this book set in BC with Punjabi female characters is because when I was younger, you would never see something like this. Absolutely never. I think about how when I was a kid, I would read tons of books, but I would absolutely never see myself in any of them. And it was to the point where it didn't even occur to me that I could be in a book because it just never happened. And it was only until I was an adult where I was like, oh, that's not cool. Like we should be able to to see ourselves and to be able to hold up a book to ourselves like a mirror and find ourselves in those pages that we find so much joy in. So now to be an adult writing novels, my priority is always to celebrate, Punjabi women especially, um, in the communities that I grew up in, and write in such a way that it feels resonant and not as though we're just kind of exotifying ourselves for the white gaze or for an external gaze that wants to just see us kind of boiled down to what we eat, and our jewelry and things like that.
That's so true. Yeah. Because I never got into fantasy as a kid as well. I used to read a lot of books, but never fantasy. And I think it was because, I couldn't find myself in the fantasy that existed at that time. So I couldn't relate to it at all. Like tried reading one or two and then I was like, no, this is not for me. But I think it's not because I don't enjoy fantasy genre. I think it was because I just couldn't relate to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we have like South Asian characters, I think kids would yeah, like especially immigrant kids or South Asian kids, they would find it very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our stories need to be told by us, not white authors, because that's where it becomes exotic, like you said. Like it's all about just clothes and just things they see on the surface, but they can never tell our experiences as we feel them.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I think that I'm very happy that today in the publishing industry, publishers are aware of that and they're listening and they're making sure that, to the best of their ability, that it's people of color telling their own stories. But 10 years ago, it would not have been the case. It would have just been like the most popular white author should tell everyone's stories and everyone else should just enjoy them. That's the rules of how things were. So I'm thrilled to be working in a time when authors of color have just completely challenged that, questioned publishing houses on all of that, and now the publishing houses are listening to us and making sure that stories look like the children and the people who read them.
Well, we look forward to reading your book and all the best with it. And congratulations on the existing books. We hope they do really well as well, because I think this voice needs to go far and beyond.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us today, Jasmine. We really enjoyed learning about your journey, about your, about your book and your fantasy favorite genre as well. And I hope, like Daman said, we are looking forward to reading your next books as well.
Thank you
But
so much,
before you
Anjula.
go, we are a happy hour.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us about your favorite drink.
My favorite drink. I love a virgin mojito. My friend, she used to work at a vegetarian steak restaurant in London, and she would make these amazing mocktails at the restaurant. And I would just like go to the restaurant like once a week just to like have her virgin mojitos. And ever since then, that has been my drink of choice.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I would like to make one virgin mojito. I've never made that.
Yeah,
They're
let's
so
put
good.
that on the list for one of the next ones.
Yeah.
And Jasmine, before we end, would you want to read us something? Something short.
So I'm going to read you a very quick poem from my new book, If I Tell You the Truth. So this poem is written in the voice of my character Gideon. Gideon is the mom in the book, and in this scene, she has just arrived to Canada for the first time, or not for the first time, but for the first time alone without her parents. She's come to Canada to study in university, and she's 18 years old. But she has this huge secret which is weighing on her heart, which is that she's pregnant, and she's pregnant out of wedlock, and the way that she got pregnant was very traumatizing. Um, so she's carrying all these secrets, and she's living in a new country, with her relatives who she doesn't know that well, in a new house, in a new bed, in a new bedroom, and just trying to make sense of life in this whole new world. Um, but like her daughter will one day, she finds so much joy and comfort and safety in art, in poetry. And for her, poetry is that safe space where she can find herself and celebrate her survival. So this poem is dedicated to the way that she survives through poetry. Lost and found. Between the pages of a story, I could hide from all of them and me. But in poetry, I found a mirror, a place where light could return to my chest. On this endless, tearful night, the sea of my stomach churned as I searched for rest in a bed that wasn't mine. And I tried not to shiver, thinking of the storm brewing in my mother. Slowly but surely, the star-drenched words of Hafiz and Rumi steadied my breath, asking me to trust that stiller waters could exist somewhere in this body.
Beautiful.
Thank
Wow,
you.
loved it. Thank you for reading that to us.
Thank you, Jasmine, so much for joining us. It was so
Thank you
great
so
talking to you
much.
and having you here.
Thank you so much, guys.
Cheers.